Hello chess lovers, welcome to the new video. We are going to be looking at the game from round 8 of Serbia Chess Open between young Indian Grandmaster Nihal Sarin and Russian Grandmaster Kovalenka Yegor. Alright, let's look at the game. So Sarin was white. He started with d4. Kovalenka replied d5, and after knight f3, knight f6, we have the famous London system, bishop f4. Kovalenka replied with c5. It's principal approach, and after e3, so you usually play e3 in the London system to be ready to capture with the e pawn and not with the c pawn. Knight c6, knight bd2, that's a normal square for the knight. Sometimes it might go here if the other knight goes there, or sometimes it might go to the queen side. Let's see. C takes d4, early capture, e takes d4. And before pushing this pawn, black develops his c8 bishop so that it doesn't block it. Yeah, if the pawn was there, it would block the bishop. So first develop the bishop, then push the pawn. Bishop b5, pinning the knight. So there is a pin here, and in this position there is a positional threat of knight e5. So you have to do something about the c6 knight. And black player chose rook c8. This move is not so common. In my database, there is only one game played with this move, and black won it, but there were some not so strong players, some candidate masters. And why is this move not popular? Because after knight e5, basically you have to give up this bishop for this knight if you don't want to ruin your pawn structure. Let me show you. So if black doesn't, so first of all there is pressure here. So let's say queen b6. After queen b6, white can capture, bishop takes, bc6, and now knight b3. So the knight controls this square, and it's not easy for black to push c5 without giving this bishop for this knight. Maybe in the future, but maybe it's not even possible. It's complicated. So if black wants to avoid that, he has to be content with trade of these two pieces. Let's see how that happens. So bishop goes back to block this pin, and white just captures. So I told you a knight for the bishop would be traded. And we had c3 protecting the pawn, and e6 opening up the f8 bishop. As you can see, white has a bishop pair, so slight advantage. At the moment the position is semi-closed, so he cannot take advantage of it, but it's a long-term asset that might prove useful in the future. Nihal played castles kingside, and we have a6 trying to chase this bishop to break this pin. Bishop came back, good diagonal, looking at the king side and controlling e4. And bishop d6 offering a trade of bishops, which white in general doesn't want. Maybe he can accept it under some circumstances, but not here. Why would you trade? Your advantage is this pair of bishop, which black does not possess. He has a combination of bishop and knight, and on the other hand they both have an extra knight. So logically white avoided the trade. He moved his bishop, and here black played bishop e7 because he didn't want to allow doubling of his pawns on the f file. Let's say he played h6. Then white could take, and after gf6 black would have doubled pawns. So he didn't want to allow this, but maybe he should have allowed it because it's not so bad. For example, if white tries to immediately attack with f4 with ideas like this, black can simply block, and then later he can, if white transfers his pieces to the king side, black can run with his king to the queen side, where he will be relatively safe, and he himself can use the g file for the attack on the opposing king. Also, notice that the e4 square is very juicy for the c6 knight. At the moment, it's a long road, but you can imagine something like this happening. If that ever happens, that would be a beautiful knight on e4. For some reason, Black didn't want to allow doubling of his pawns on the f file, so he retreated with bishop e7. And here was a good chance for white to start an attack with the move f4. Remember, in that variation, as I showed you, there was a pawn on f6 which could advance and block this pawn. But here, such possibility does not exist. If you decide to block with this pawn, then you make a lot of holes on the dark squares. Anyway, Nihal didn't do that, although that was the most promising continuation. Instead, he just took the e file with his rook. A slow move, not a bad move, but the other one was much better. Now, queen c7. Why queen c7? So black vacates this square so that he can retreat the knight and once again offer the trade of these two bishops, so to deny white the advantage of bishop pair. Queen f3 followed, and the mentioned knight d7 offering the trade. This time, if white avoids, black can keep chasing that bishop. So Nihal obliged. He exchanged on e7 and played queen h3. So let's see. What is queen h3 all about? At first, it is not clear. But one of the ideas is to free this pawn so that in the future it can advance. Not at the moment, but in the future. So black immediately blocked those ideas with queen f4 and attacked the knight. The knight retreated, and here was a good chance for black to equalize. So he could have played h5 with the idea of offering the trade of queens which cannot be stopped. You cannot play g3 because this guy, knight f3, is hanging. So that would be unavoidable. A trade would happen with an equalish endgame. But black didn't take this opportunity. Instead, he played rook c6. And now, after rook e3, this idea doesn't work anymore because the f3 knight is protected, so white can always attack the queen and then with his own queen hide here and then push the black queen out of his position and preserve the queens on the board. G6 was played, rook e1, taking firm control of the e file, and we have h5. So the idea is to trade queens, but now because the knight is defended, g3 is possible. Because if the knight wasn't defended, of course, black would capture it. But the knight is defended, and now queen g4 is a bad move because there is a free square here. So white hides there and threatens to capture this queen on the next move. That's why queen g4 is not good. So instead of going there, black retreated. Queen f6. White went to g2. So he is redeploying his queen to better square and avoiding any tricks on the h file. Knight f5, hitting the rook. We cannot allow that, so we take on f5, gf5, and now a blocking move, h4. So the idea of this move is to stop this pawn, to fix it on h5, so it cannot open up the king side. Also, it gives a nice square on g5 for this knight. The only caveat is that this push of the f-pawn looks dangerous. So let's check it. What would have happened if that had been played? f4, one variation goes gf4, brave move, opening up the g file with the queen and the king lined up. But let's see if black can take advantage of that. Queen f4, knight g5, blocking the g file. And now, if black does not take this pawn, white can secure it and then have a very good positional advantage. But if he does take it, he will lose his queen after rook e4. So he will gain two rooks for it, d4, rook e4. There was no free squares for the queen. But in this position, the problem of black's is that his rooks are separated. And because of that, the coordination is not good, and the knight and the queen together can make threats on the dark squares, which will be hard to defend by black. Alright, so that's why f4 was not played. That's one of the lines. There are many other lines because there is a lot of possibilities there, but all of them favor white. So here, black comes up with a good plan. So he realizes that his king cannot go to the king side. It's not really safe there. So instead, he decides to run to the queen side or something like that. Let's see this maneuver. This is Nimzovich style. He used to do this maybe 100 years ago or 80 or 90 years ago, something like that. We have knight g5. Knight goes to a nice post, protected by a pawn, and black continues with his plan. So he wants to run his king to the queen side. Queen f3 was played, king b8, and now white realizes, okay, so if the black king is on the queen side, I want to open some lines there and maybe create some weaknesses. Let's see, b3, preparing c4. King a7, so black reached his safe haven, but maybe he should be happy also on b8 and maybe introduce this rook into the game. c4 followed. So at first it looked that this move was impossible because black attacked twice and white controlled this square only once. But it's a sort of a pawn sacrifice that is not really a pawn sacrifice. But let's say that black's captured this guy because it's also not protected. Queen d4, we can just attack the queen. And when it moves, this guy will fall. For example, cd5, ed5, rook d5, and what's the result? The result of this combination is that black has three terrible pawns that will slowly but surely drop like flies one by one, and white would gain a winning advantage in that manner. So black didn't go for that. He instead captured on c4. And now you don't recapture here so that black can capture there, or even better here, but instead you push d5, attack the knight, and when black captures, here Nihal played queen d5, but there was even better move. Rook e7, hitting the knight and hitting the pawn which was already attacked by this knight. So this would be very unpleasant for black. But he didn't do it. Nihal actually played queen d5, which looks good. You attack here, you attack here, you attack there, and also black has many weak pawns. But the other move was much better, because here black had some counter chances. So he could have played, for example, f4. Because no one is controlling the f-pawn, so he could have played like this, attacking the rook and threatening to open lines on the king side. Or if white takes, we would have opening of the lines. That's why immediate f4 is important and not including capture on b3, because then white would recapture with the rook, and now e4 would not come with a tempo because there is no rook on e3, so that would give white time to react. Actually, he could just capture the knight, but in the other variations he could not because the rook was attacked. Okay, but black missed this chance. He attacked the queen. It's a logical move, but it misses that opportunity. So he still can fight. It's a balanced position, better for white, but the other option was much more promising. And here white took the pawn on f7, and now came maybe not the decisive mistake, but the penultimate mistake. So here it was important to activate this rook and to get rid of this queen in this manner. Rook f8, and if white trades, what has happened is that there is no queen on f6. And why is that important? If white captures, we can push f4, attacking the rook, attacking this guy. This guy we don't have to rush. It is attacked twice, it will fall, no doubt about that. But here, white doesn't have this trick because the f6 rook is protected. But compare this with what happened in the game. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm trying to explain so that you can understand. So in the game, instead of rook f8, black captured on b3, and white recaptured with his queen. And now we have a queen on f6 and not a rook. And look, if black now pushes f4, white has rook f3, pinning here, so you cannot take. And on the next move, white can capture this pawn. So that's the difference. You don't want your queen here because of this tactical shot. So it's a very nuanced, but I think a grandmaster should see this kind of stuff. Anyway, in the heat of the battle, he didn't realize it, Kovalenka, and he allowed this to happen. So queen b3. Now he activated his rook because f4 doesn't work. But now white goes back with his knight, controls f4, and now this will never happen. If it happens, for example, now we take it with the knight, we keep our kingside pawns intact, and of course black has a weakness, a position is lost for black. So after knight h3, rook came to c1, trying to find some counter chances on the first rank. We had knight f4, and look at this knight. It's blocking the f5 pawn and attacking the h5 pawn and protecting all the squares around white king. So not a good position for black, actually very bad position. After queen d4, we had king g2, going to a safer square, rook 8 c3, and now white took on c1, and here actually black made a blunder. So he should have gone for this position where he would have a queen against two rooks, and then maybe after something like this, check, rook f3, f4, he could hope that the king would be open after a capture like this, and that this queen would somehow harass the white king and maybe draw the game in that way. Actually, it should be a draw with correct play. But instead of that, he didn't want to do it. He took on c1, and this is just a blunder, because look, the rook on c1 and the queen on d4 are in a special relation. It's called a relation that can be forked. A knight e2 forked happened, attacking two pieces, winning decisive material. Queen a1, knight c1, queen c1. White is an exchange up, he's completely winning. And on top of that, there is a problem with this knight. I will just show you. After rook e6, queen c7, queen e3, there is a pin, so you can never move your king backwards because you will just lose your knight. So black decided to make a square here, but that doesn't really help because after f3, white is preparing to exchange all the pieces on the b6 square and then to push his pawns on the king side into the queen. Let's look at the sample variation. here actually black resigned, but after, for example, king a6, we trade everything on b6. Rook takes, queen takes, queen takes, king takes, and after g4 there is a simple threat to make queen. So let's say black takes, we take back, again we have the threat, and if he takes we just push, and as you can see, the square of this pawn is unreachable by the black king. It is too far away. As you know, he needs to be in this square in order to stop the h pawn. So on the other hand, his pawns are too slow, so the h pawn would just, as I mentioned, promote. That's why after the move f3, with the unavoidable exchange on b6, Kovalenka resigned, and with this victory, Nihal Sarin actually won the tournament. He played one more game, but in that game it was enough for him to draw, and that's what he did. So basically this was the game that gave him the first prize and made him the winner of the Serbian Chess Masters Open Tournament 2021. Congratulations to Nihal Sarin. He played some enterprising chess. He was featured in a few games on my channel as well. I hope you enjoyed the coverage of Serbia Chess Masters, and see you in the next video. Bye!